It's a pleasure to be in Miami. I'll come from Chicago and it was snowing there yesterday. So there's that. I'll read from the book called The Making of Zombie Wars. I might explain a thing or two along the way, but I'll start at the beginning, the first part, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Or not. Script idea number 2. An elderly contract killer with a heart condition is forced to go into retirement after he failed at his last hit. It's his only miss, so when he has a chance to redo it and restore his perfect record, he cannot say no, even if he's risking a heart attack. But then, he falls in love with the target's teenage daughter. Title, The Last Heart. Script idea number 7. A blind man and a blind woman, attracted to each other by smell. On their first date, they find themselves at a murder scene and catch the killer's particular scent. Nobody believes them, and the perfumed killer is now pursuing them. Title, Where Do We Go From Nowhere? Script idea number 12. DJ Spinoza is a misfit no one understands, not his schoolmates, not his friends, not his teachers. His one dream is to DJ at his prom night and blow all those assholes away. After his radical DJing results in a disastrous party at the place of the girl, her name is Rise, he aims to hook up with, he ends up castigated. What will it take to make everyone dance and Rise fall for him? Title, Spinning Out of Control. Now, what could I do with the boy? Joshua asked himself. All human feelings are derived from pleasure, pain, and desire, but most important, Spin could say to Rise, from the beat. And what if he said nothing? What if he was the strong, silent type? Why this and not that? Writing is nothing if not carrying the hopeless, backbreaking burden of decisions devoid of consequences. Afternoon at a coffee shop slipped into evening just as Joshua's caffeination reached the heights of the Rwandan plantations where his beverages originated. Hence, he was burning to surf the web for Rwanda, learn some interesting facts about other cultures, and allow his current creative dilemmas to resolve themselves. Back in the day, before the World Wide Web of temptation, there used to be that thing called inspiration. Then the spirit was perpetually displaced by trivia and vanity search. Mercifully, there was no internet access at the coffee shop. Hence, Joshua opened up a file with another script in perpetual development, titled The Snake Man Blues, in which a comic book geek and a retired superhero, the Snake Man, ungainfully employed as a public school English teacher, team up to fight the evil mayor of Chicago. Joshua was incapable of deciding whether the Snake Man would die at the end or live to go back to teaching, a truly heroic activity in the city of Chicago, and if so, whether he would do so in his human or his serpentine form. The happy ending was corny, while the death was depressing, and Joshua could think of nothing in between. Besides, how exactly would a reptile fight the Chicago Police Department and the devious mayor? Too hypoglycemic to type a word, which would then perhaps lead to the next word, he could perceive only the blank space below what he'd written last. Baruch the spinner was right. Infinity exhausts all reality. But finitude does it too, almost. Joshua stared at the crosswalk outside a coffee shop where nothing was happening until he discovered some comfort in devising wisecracks for some imaginary audience at some future dinner party. How is a shop, S-H-O-P-P-E, different from a shop, S-H-O-P? Did the wife of Bath drink soy milk chai lattes? Are the Middle English-speaking baristas commonly stricken Black Death, etc.? He was about to open a new file to log all the shop cracks when a pack of ROTC cadets appeared on the Olive Street horizon in fatefully slow motion, reminding him of that long shot in Lawrence of Arabia, where in the flatline desert, a speck grows into horsemen. The cadets forded the street fake punching one another, slapping shaven necks, no worry in their lives save the fear of being expelled from the pack. And then he saw them in the desert, thickly coated in dust, tongue hanging thirsty on their way to a battle where they would mature or heroically die, the nefarious natives offering them contaminated piss-warm water in beaten tin cups. The cadets couldn't begin to conceive of their sandstorming future. They couldn't as much as pity themselves in advance. In fact, they could see little beyond their imminent meal, beyond acting out their childish toughness, beyond play-acting hand-to-hand combat at lunch break. He who has a mind capable of a great many things has a body whose greatest part is eternal, wrote Spinoza. And out of that sad ROTC mindlessness, the scene from Dawn of the Dead was recollected, in which zombies tottered in circles around the populated shopping mall, unable to forget their life before their undeath, their infected brains still retaining the remnants of their happy Christmas memories. A chubby cadet sensed the intensity of Joshua's inspired gaze, and as the rest of the corps trundled on to the next door sandwich shop, stopped to grin at him from the other side of the window. His face was wide, his cheeks flushed, his front teeth of uneven sizes like a skyline, his eyes lit up with the arrogant innocence of youth. In a blissful blink, Joshua saw the narrative landscape neatly laid down before him. All the endless possibilities, all the overhead and wide shots, all the graceful character trajectories blazing across the spectacular firmament, all the expanse conducive to a love interest. All Joshua had to do was stroll through that Edenic symmetry and write it down. This time, he was determined, his vision would not decompose in the computer's memory with the skeletons of his other ideas. He opened, right then and there, a new final draft file and created a title page to stare at it. Zombie Wars by Joshua Levin, Chicago, March 31st, 2003, whereupon he stared at it. Alas, unless you are the Lord himself, creation cannot be willed. Joshua needed to eat something before embarking upon it, and hence stood in line behind an over-tattooed prick who couldn't decide between banana and pumpkin bread, while the barista in a Che Guevara hat, yet presumably fluent in little fucking English, looked on indifferently. The impasse allowed Joshua to imagine a zombie biting into the prick's neck tattoos, blood splashing the ready lattes, turning them pink, the zombie oblivious to the hysterically hissing espresso machine. The revolutionary Chaucerian barista, artistically striving for the perfect foam, took an eternity to steam the milk for Joshua's cappuccino, giving enough time for the zombie apocalypse to smoothly exhaust its cataclysmic reality and sink to the bottom of Joshua's mind. Back at his shaky table, he sat munching on carrot bread until he reached a Zen-worthy level of caffeine crash blankness. He closed the file, then the program, and then, finally, his computer to put it in his bag to sleep. Now, Joshua, who writes these attempts at scripts, also teaches English as a second language to immigrants, and also goes to a screenwriting workshop where one of the people he goes to who shares the workshop with him is a Bosnian named Bega. He was also, for reasons that I will not get into now, he escaped from his apartment because his landlord is crazy. So he's living with his girlfriend at this time. So a little later, he goes to work. There were 7 students in Joshua's level 5 ESL class, and they sat there facing him like a jury that had already reached its grim verdict. In the far back row, as far from Joshua's dubious authority as they could get, sat Captain Ponomarenko and his rotund wife, Larissa. Captain Ponomarenko had been an officer of the KGB, unhappily decommissioned by the collapse of the USSR, and still resented the fact that America, the land of limp imbeciles, amply represented by Teacher Josh, somehow managed to win the Cold War. He steadily aimed his barbed questions and contemptuous scowls at Teacher Josh, while the fair and larded Larissa endorsed whatever her husband was hatefully thinking. Presently, they were convinced that Teacher Josh was personally and primarily responsible for the ongoing invasion of Iraq. They brought up the whole mess in nearly every class, and not at all because they cared about the Iraqis, let alone democracy or justice, but rather to expose the eternal rottenness of America's imperialist soul. Accordingly, Joshua had become adept at changing the subject and pushing the class toward discussing the challenges they would face while acquiring, say, a fish tank. Then there was a pair of heavily postmenopausal matryoshki who could not possibly care less about invadable distant lands or English grammar or anything at all, save for the intimidating presence of black people in their new country. The ladies, all Trump voters now, the ladies never offered any thoughts, stories, or opinions that failed to reiterate their belief that African Americans were inherently criminal. The squatter of the two, Yekaterina, had been blessed with having once heard of one black stealing a car door off its hinges, which provided her with a conversation topic for the rest of her natural life. There was Fyodor, an ex-rocket scientist prone to randomly quoting Dostoevsky in Russian, who had demanded that Joshua help him translate an old VHS player manual. Expertly egged on by Captain Soviet, he'd taken Joshua's claim that VHS was obsolete at the beginning of the new millennium as yet another instance of blind American selfishness. Then there was Varya, who, it had recently turned out, was iffily progressing through brutal chemotherapy. She had been coming to class wearing a variable headscarf and sat always silent under the colorful map of Israel, all of which had misled teacher Josh into thinking she was Orthodox. Only after he had forced the class into one of those role-playing exercises whereby Captain Ponomarenko had become the doctor and Varya the patient, had it come out that she'd been battling advanced ovarian cancer. Since teacher Josh could formulate no appropriate response to the immense fact of cancer, he would consequently find himself providing the medical vocabulary for the entire female genital area. He clumsily sketched a lily-shaped vagina on the board, discovering along the way that he was entirely oblivious to many of its parts and could not remember the words for others. The evil Ponomarenkos had kept nudging each other and chuckling either at his ignorance or at his embarrassment, or both. The only bright light in all that post-Cold War darkness was Anna, she of the downcast eyes. A Bosnian in her late 30s, Anna was his best student by a long shot, not least because she kept away from the collective contempt of the whispering Russians, congenitally infected with Soviet malice. She used to study medicine, she'd said, adding a few small parts to the vagina floor plan, including a clitoris, most impressively rendered as a large dot. She'd done it so unabashedly that Joshua thought up a pun, unabashedly, which often came to him whenever he laid eyes on her. And she was easy on the eyes too. She was partial to knee-length skirts and cleavage-enhancing décolletage, her heels high enough to be sexy, never high enough to be slutty. Her fashion style, however, seemed wholly incongruous with the indelible sorrow she constantly radiated, which Joshua found as compelling as her curves. One day, he had given his students an assignment to write about their respective hometowns and read them aloud. The Ponomarenkos were from Vitebsk, a town barely worthy of a lazy paragraph. The Moscow Matryoshki drew a poor picture of the magnificent monuments built by the Tsars and Bolsheviks. Varya was from Kazakhstan and wrote about the radiant and radioactive beauty of the desert. But Anna, raising her sea-green eyes to meet Joshua's, read her composition mournfully, recalling the normal life back in Sarajevo, her hometown, before the war. People greeted one another on the street. The youth danced all night. There was a linden tree smelling sweetly and quaintly right under her window. He understood that her hot attire did not signify promiscuity, contrary to the consensual interpretation of the other male teachers, but a kind of nostalgia. This was what she used to wear when she was happy, when she used to live the normal life. She simply could not let go, just as Captain Soviet could not let go of his Cold War bullshit or Varya of his cancer. All bodies agree in certain things. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm just going to stand here and read if it's okay. This book, the narrator of of this passage I'm going to read, is a taxi driver in Edinburgh, and taxi drivers in Scotland are very, very different from taxi drivers in America. Because taxi drivers in America tend to be newcomers to the country, and they tend to be working their way up into the system. Whereas taxi drivers in Edinburgh are all kind of, they're usually guys who have worked in the building trade for years and have got enough money to buy a taxi, and they're usually cocaine, they're often kind of cocaine dealers, basically. So they're kind of, I mean, most of my friends in Edinburgh are taxi drivers. They're guys that have just worked on building sites and have kind of got, they've bought a taxi and they drive around picking up fares when they can be bothered, basically. And this guy, Terry, he's more interested in picking up women. And this is when Edinburgh's about to have its first hurricane in 100 years. We get a lot of hurricanes down here in Miami. We don't get so many in Scotland. So here he goes, in the cab. Talk about fucking warning bells. It's pissing wet with these gales, and there is this lassie out walking down Queensferry Road, which is fucking deserted. She's heading towards the Forth Road Bridge. At this time, and in this fucking weather. A fare's a fare, but And besides, the jumpers are usually guys. Very seldom do you get Fanny try to top itself that way. Aye, they sent us on a fucking course so that we could spot the Harry Carey crew. They told us all the things you need to say to stop them, like counselling and all that. Not that I fucking well bother, Some cunt wants to jump, let them fucking well jump. Fuck all that nanny state bollocks. Some fuckers made their mind up about it. They must have good fucking reasons. It's not for the likes of a total stranger to say anything different. Wouldn't it be me anyway? Jump off a cliff, then some bird phones you up the next day deciding that she's going to give you your hole after all. Nah, fuck that. Too much to live for me, but mind you, I can understand how some gadgets that aren't getting a ride would want to jump. Fuck that for a game of sodgers. But with a lassie, it's different. Nobody in their right mind wants to see good fanny going to waste. A bird's minge is meant to be all hot for the rumpy-pumpy, not all cold and stretched out on a slab, although there's some dirty cunts that would go for that. I blame that fucking internet, letting bairns watch extreme porn, but they've not even had a proper wank. That shite would fuck any cunt's head up. Too right. I've made the odd scud flick, but it's I've been consenting adults, nae dodgy stuff. So I stops, and the lassie gets in the cab. Her black hair's plastered to her head by the rain, her long black coat's heavy with it, and her eyes are all fogged over. All right, doll, a bit blustery to be out the night, Never heard of Hurricane Bobag. But this bird, she's just sitting there, staring off into space with 8 dark eyes, probably brown, set in a roundish face. The lights are on, but there's nae cunt hame. The bridge, she says in this accent that's either posh Scottish or English. So what's happening out at the bridge then? She suddenly looks all offended, like it's none of my business. Hey, dinna look at us like that, I'm going, with that face on. See if you jump off that bridge, it's my case that the fucking police get on. I've got to ask you questions. She's looking right at us in that wide-eyed horror, like the lasses have in these movies like Scream, but kind of no like Scream at all, because I'm just going all tight, like I've rumbled her. But that's up to you, I shrugs. It's your business. Just tell us if you are, so I can give the police some story. Like you told us you were going to your sister's house in Inverkeithing, then you said you were sick, and you had to get out and puke, and the next thing you just couch yourself right out of that fucking rail. That sort of shite. Got to cover my arse bit, She puts her head in her hands and mumbles something I didn't catch, then jerks up and goes, I can get out here. No, I'll take you to the bridge. I shakes my head. The way I see it, if you're determined to do it, you will. And it's fucking kicking up big time out there. You might as well go out there in comfort. And she doesn't even flinch at that. I'll tell you one thing, but I puts her in the picture. You're not going out this cab without paying your fare first. I've got money. She reaches into her purse. How much? £70 and some change. I'm not being funny, I goes, glancing in the mirror, but you might as well just hand it all over. If you're sure like, just it'd be a wasted osh, eh? You jumping with all that money in your pockets. Not being wide likes. The lassie looks angry, staring at me for the first time, then shrugs and settles back into the seat. If I was ever in any doubt that this was the right time to leave this fucking place, you would have convinced me. And she reaches forward again and shows the contents of her purse. Stops at the red light, turns and reaches through the Judas hole and takes the money and crams it into my pocket. The road's empty, thank fuck. Hey, I'm not being funny like, and I'm not trying to stop you. Genuine, but I've got to ask, what's a good-looking young lassie like you wanting to do this for? You wouldn't understand. She shakes her head. Nobody does. Well, explain to me, I goes, because it said on this course, keep them talking. What's your name? I'm Terry, by the way. I get Kent as Juice Terry, because I worked in the juice lorries way back. Sometimes Scud Terry, because, well, I'm not going to bore you with the details. My name is Sarah Ann Lamont, she says, like she's a robot. I'll get called Sal, S-A-L, Sarah Ann Lamont. You flew up here then, Sal? Yeah, Portobello originally, but I've lived in London for years. Lamont, you say? Yeah, at least it isn't Lawson. Thank fuck, you've got to check. With that cunt of an old man of mine having chucked his spunk around the town like a lunatic spraying asylum walls. What's it you did in there? What line of work are you in? Another bitter wee shrug, and she pushes the wet tresses of hair out of her eyes. I write plays, though the rest of the world seems to disagree. You know, got a fella down there, somebody who'll be worried about you. Ha! She laughs, all cynical. I'm fleeing an emotionally abusive relationship. I'm back in my home city with a specially commissioned play at the Traverse. It was supposed to be the return of the prodigal daughter, but the critics have not been kind, and I've had enough. Does that answer your question? So you're going to kill yourself over a felly and a play. You don't understand. Find another felly. Write another play if that one was shite. I shot a prisoner of war porno flick once. They do like it up them. Wasn't it that great? But it didn't deter. It wasn't shite, she goes, now angry for the first time. You just don't get it, but I'm not surprised. All right. So the lassie's going to be fish food in 20 minutes. But I'm not that struck on her patter, eh? Oh, aye. I see. Because I drive a cab, I can't understand. Is that it? Because I drive a taxi, I can't be expected to understand the complex mind of an artiste. I didn't say that. I've done a fair bit of acting. Not stage, but screen. And understand the process, I'll have you know. I'm telling her. People think that Scud's just about banging away. But as my mate Sick Boy always says, we're telling a story here. So I've got to know my lines, and you've got to hit your mark. I'm not saying that I'm Brad Pitt, but then again, I'm not saying that that cunt's Juice Terry. Last year, we were shooting Dr. Scheme, a thorough examination, and I had to stick one thermometer up this bird's minge, the other up her arse, and say, the hottest hole is the one that gets this fat dick, baby. Sounds fucking straightforward enough, but it's not that easy when there's cameras on you, lights shining in your coupon, a boom mic overhead, and sick boy fucking prancing around shouting orders at you. But she's off on one, but all good, let them talk, the boy on the course says. All I've ever wanted to do was write, she shouts. 4 years of my life went into that play and they didn't get it. They didn't get me. That's the sneering men I could understand, that cabal of sad old queens. But when the jealous fucking so-called sisters turned on me, she shakes her head, letting those wet locks fly. No, I've had enough. There's no lot you can say to that. I look at her in the mirror. She reminds me of that bird for Liverpool that I made Anal Torpedo 3 with. That was when I played the captain on the whaling ship, crewed by lassies wearing fishnet tights. Catchphrase, there she blows. She's gone all quiet as we're passing the Barrington roundabout, her hands clasped together on her lap, her head bowed, staring at them. So I thinks, fuck it, I'll make a wee move here. Listen, this might seem a wee bit cheeky, Sal, but can I ask you a favour? She looks up at me like I'm fucking crazy. What, you want a favour from me? What? What favour can I do for anyone now? Well, just wondering, see if you weren't in any big hurry, I goes, giving her a cheeky wee smile. Any chance of a ride before you jump? What? Her face sort of twists, then she's silent again. Suits me. She's not saying yes, but she's not saying no. I was just wondering, Sal, and I ken it's a wee bit cheeky, but the quiet bairn gets knout. Maybe just go out with a bang. Last night on Earth, I goes, tell you what, I give you a good fucking cowp. Pardon my French. You want to have sex with me? Suicidal Sal laughs, her voice going all high, like she can't believe what she's hearing. And fuck, she's getting out of her coat and pulling off her jumper. She's sitting there in a black bra. Go ahead, pull up, do what the fuck you like. And I does that all right, heading off the slip road just before the bridge toll booth comes into view. The howling wind is that strong that I can barely move the door at first. But with a ride in the back, it could be on its side, buried under an avalanche, and I'd still be able to fucking well open it. Fasten your seatbelt, hen, I shouts to her, because we could be in for some offy bumpy, rumpy pumpy. Thanks very much for listening, folks. Cheers.
I guess we open for questions. There's a microphone.
I was going to say, I'm quite sure I can do it without it. I don't know if you're both familiar, but C-SPAN here in the States devotes all of their weekend programming to non-fiction topics. So biographies, historical novels, that's the closest they get to fiction. 48 hours every single weekend. So dioceses, they've got people taping programs here that wouldn't be taping this. Do you, either of you have any reaction or opinion about the logic for a fiction-oriented TV program, let's say once a week, where fill in the blank, Messrs. Hemon and Welsh, or Don DeLillo, or John Vanderbilt, or McEwen, J.D. Smith, whomever your preference is, would be on for 30 to 60 minutes. Do you think in your heart of hearts there's a market for that?
Well, my heart does not deal in markets normally.
Or your brain?
Neither does the brain, sadly. But I could see, I would watch the program. There's an intelligent conversation. Or conversation just. It doesn't even have to be intelligent. I think it's, there's a prevalence of nonfiction, as though the nonfiction determines what is important, or what is important ends up in nonfiction, whereas fiction is kind of, a silly thing on the side. But many important things can be examined in fiction, and not even important, it sounds pretentious, I don't mean important, things that are not otherwise examined in a way that it is not possible to do in non-fiction. Now, I've talked to many of the people you've mentioned, not all of them, and they are fun to talk to. I mean, this is not just, how a highfalutin literary talk, which I have nothing against. I can do that all day long. But there are people who have fun stories about the world and other people. And Mr. Welsh here, I'm sure, could tell you a number of stories right now and fill up a program.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a shame because you don't have these kind of channels. I remember when I was younger, growing up in the UK and the broadcasting system there, you had a lot of. There was one program in Scotland that was devoted entirely to books in Scotland, which would be a bizarre thing now to even think of that. That would happen. And a lot of, as well as dedicated UK book shows, there was. People like Melvin Bragg and the South Bank show, they dedicated a lot of the episodes to authors. So, yes, it's a shame, and I think it's part of the way our culture has become so kind of screen orientated and to some extent kind of rendered a little bit crass and sort of dumbed down a bit. I agree. I think that. Some writers I think are very entertaining, and I think there is a potential audience that isn't kind of being reached.
So if you guys were free at a certain time of year, you might be willing to show up?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you try and keep us away.
No. Thank you.
I've got the floor. So just in case it prompts anything, I kind of showed my hand, a handful of the authors, fiction writers, and I love both your fiction, whom I love. Just in case, clean piece of paper, anybody writing these days for either or both of you, where you would say, you know what, you got to sit down and read this writer.
There are a lot of writers, I think. I have, I guess, living writers you're talking about. I really liked Elena Ferrante, I have to say. Her Napolitan tetralogy and other books, that to me was very, and I don't really care that her identity was relieved either way, or revealed rather. So I enjoy that. There are other books I'm reading, but whenever someone asks me this, I'm completely blank. I can't think of a single book I'm reading. But yeah, Elena Ferrante means something to me.
Yeah, that was a good choice. I think there's a Scottish writer that I'd like to recommend to people called Jenny Fagan. She wrote a novel called The Panopticon, and her second novel, The Sunlight Pilgrims, is very, very, very good, and it's very, very topical. So yeah, I'd certainly recommend her. Fagan, as in like Fagin, the Artful Dodger, and Oliver.
Great, thank you. All right, I have a question. Well, I have a question for both of you. I don't know if this is working. How much of your research, how much of your writing is based on research? How much of it is autobiographical? I mean, I suspect all authors have some element of autobiography, because it's obviously coming out of themselves. I'm intrigued especially by some of your work and to the degree to which it's based on personal experience or just research or imagination. So that's my question for both of you.
Yeah, but with me it was, I think there's a lot of more, I think what happens with writers is that you have a lot more elements of biography in your earlier books, and then you kind of write that out if you've written quite a few books. I think that, and it's very hard to say because I think, I'm one of the kind of writers who lets the subconscious do the heavy lifting, basically. I just kind of write, and I usually knock out a first draft, and then I kind of try to authenticate it more with research. So when you do that, you don't know where it comes from. Sometimes I've written things that they didn't seem to have anything to do with me, and then years later, somebody's jogged my memory about something, and it has been, more autobiographical. You don't really know, and some of it is, it's a bit of a soup. It's a bit of a kind of casserole of different things, and some of it's a direct experience of other people that you've kind of witnessed, so you've heard from kind of secondhand. So it's very. I think it's when you operate on instinct, to think about the composition of it and how it actually comes about is kind of, it requires a level of abstraction that, I don't know about you, Alexander, but something that I don't really possess in that way. Yeah.
I've written books where I had to do extensive research in the sense of, reading old books and newspaper articles and all this. And what I usually do in that situation, I stay away from it for a little time, because I do not, as I'm reading and researching this, some narrative assembling is taking place. And when I remove myself from the actual documents that I have to look at during the research, a year or two later, what I write down is the story that I had assembled. And I might fact check it later, right? But I would write down what I remember from those things. But there's also the research of talking to other people. Everything ends in the same, vacant space here, and then it all mixes and jumbles, so that a story that I might have heard from a cabbie, and this has happened, might somehow copulate with a historical fact or an anecdote that I had read somewhere, and also the stuff that I made up, and also a random memory from my childhood that was completely taken out of context and given to someone else who lived 100 years ago, and so on. And to me, nothing that I write is autobiographical. Some of it is personal, or it starts as personal, and then it becomes part of a narrative. But in the process of writing, everything that I write, in the end, becomes personal. So even the shit that I make up ends up being personal. The history or the research that I had absorbed becomes personal. And in many ways, for many writers, I think writing and creating a narrative work, and this includes nonfiction, I think, is an act of transference from the domain of personal to the domain of the public. And once it reaches the public, it no longer belongs to me. This belongs to me because I hope to get royalties for this one day. But I have no control over it. And so now we're negotiating over the meaning of this.
Mr. Wilson, I'm curious about your involvement with the upcoming sequel to the Trainspotting film, and I'm also curious if you feel that adaptation of Trainspotting was helpful to you or not.
Oh, it was very helpful to me. Don't worry about that. But my aspirations for this one are kind of, I hope this will be too. I think when you're a writer and you have an author and you have your book adapted for screen, whether it's film or TV, it's a win-win situation. You're playing, you're in the casino playing with the house money, really. If a film's terrible, you can just distance yourself from it, and you can say, "Oh my God, they've messed up my book." Read my book. You can go all precious. And if a film's great, you say, "Well, of course it's great. It had this fantastic source material." So you have to see it in that kind of very positive light. I've had like 5 books now adapted into film, and some of them they've all been really interesting experiences, and have all been involved in different ways and in different levels in the process of adaptation for each of them. This one, the Trainspotting 2 one, came from a book, Porno. We couldn't call it porno, obviously, because nobody's going to go walk under a cinema, under a cinema sign with porno on a sort of date movie. But It was a kind of, I mean, I was involved as a producer, I was involved doing a bit of acting on it, and I was obviously involved in the development of the script. And I'm actually going to New York tomorrow to see it for the first time in a cinema for a test screening that Sony are doing. But it's a strange thing. It's whatever you negotiate with the filmmakers. And I was probably more involved in this one than I've been in a lot of them because the history, obviously, that I have with the people that made it. So yeah, I say that I'm involved. I'm quite heavily involved, but that's only because I think it's going to be a good film. If it's a terrible film and it doesn't work, it's had nothing to do with me at all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, folks. Thank you for coming by.